Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for Game Freak at this micro instant. For you. Hate. Alright, now that the obligatory melodramatic intro is out of the way, let's go into my playthrough of Pokemon Sword and Shield. I start off by naming myself Sinner and watching some video on Dailymotion which introduces us to Chairman Rose and the champion Leon. The video ends and I head down to town with my neighbor Hop to meet Leon in person. Once we find him, he gives us our starters and I choose a score bunny named Penalty Kick. After a night of barbecuing with Hop and his family, I have a battle with our newly acquired Pokemon and head on my way to the next town. But before that happens, me and Hop go on a side quest to save a Wooloo that wandered off into the slumbering Weald. We travel deep into the woods, but instead of Wooloo, we find a mysterious dog-looking Pokemon, which clouds our vision with fog. Leon shows up to rescue us, and I can finally go to Wedgehurst. I briefly pass through it, then battle down Route 2, where Professor Magnolia and Leon are waiting. Professor Magnolia convinces Leon to give us a chance at the gym challenge, and he says he will if we impress him with a battle. Me and Hop do exactly that, and can finally begin our path to become champion. The first step on our journey is to get on a train so we can make it to the gym challenge inauguration in Motostoke. After one train ride and a short walk through the wild area, me and Hop are at the ceremony. Before we get into it, we stay at the Budu Drop Inn, where Sonia tells the legend of the darkest day and the hero that saved Galar. I also encounter Team Yell in the lobby. They're blocking the reception table, so I kick their asses to get them out of the way. Afterwards, the trainer they are cheering for, Marnie, shows up to shoo them off. The next day, we're officially entered into the gym challenge. The first gym is past Route 3, through Galar Mine, and beyond Route 4, in Turfield. In the mine, I run into a Chairman Rose dick rider called Bede and kick its ass in battle. I enter the gym, and after corralling some Wooloo, make it into the arena to face off against the grass gym leader, Milo. After an easy sweep from Penalty Kick, I get the badge and advance towards my next goal. This leads me over the bridge on Route 5, where I have fights with Team Yell and Hop respectively. While on Route 5, I find a Dottler, which I catch and dub Bogo's Bented. Eventually, I end up in Holbury, where I battle Nessa and her water gym. After a long struggle against Dynamax bullshit, I defeat Nessa to get the badge. Outside her gym, Chairman Rose's assistant, Oleana, tells me to meet the chairman at a nearby seafood restaurant. I do that, they talk to me for a minute, and then I head down to the docks to catch my next team member, an Aero Scuda named Hart. I circle my way back to Motostoke shortly after and run into Bede on the way, who once again gets its ass handed to it. Kabu, the fire gym leader, is waiting for me in the next gym. With Hart by my side, he proves to be no challenge, and I move on to Hammerlock. Before I get there, I once again run into Bede. This time Hop is with me, and he beefs with Bede before losing to it in a Pokemon battle. Eventually, I get to Hammerlock, and find Chairman Rose, who explains how energy is made to me. Then I see Leon, who tells me to talk to Raihan at the vault. I do that, and find Sonia inside, who info dumps some lore on me. I finally start heading to the next gym, and catch a Yamask named Kaba on the way. When I make it to Stow-on-Side, I'm challenged by Hop, and then the gym leader, Alistair. I defeat both of them, and immediately move on to Balonlay. I swiftly beat Opal and her gym, and go with her back to Hammerlock. Then I try to get on Route 7, but am briefly interrupted by Hop, who wants to get beat again. On Route 7, I catch a Phalanx named Return, and find my way up to Sirchester. When I get there, I fight the Ice-type gym leader, Melanie, and defeat her with the power of my newly caught Return. I exit the gym and find Sonia inside, who I follow to a restaurant in town. Once inside the restaurant, we both notice a tapestry which contains some lore. One battle with Hop later, and I go down through Route 9. There I catch my final team member, a Marini named Flint, Michigan. I end up at the gate of Spikemuth, which is closed, so I have Marnie let me in after I beat her in a battle. Inside Spikemuth, I face a gauntlet of Team Yell members and the gym leader, Piers, at the end. After he's dealt with, I go outside where I see Leon. We both hear loud tremors coming from an unknown source. It's also apparently causing random Pokemon to Dynamax. Leon goes off to deal with it, and I head back to Hammerlock. There, we learn from Sonia that Chairman Rose is worried about the energy crisis and wants to learn more about Dynamax to help counter this in some way. Leon tells us not to worry about that though, so we move on to the final gym challenge, Raihan and his dragon types. It was hard fought, but eventually Penalty Kick and Return defeated Raihan. Outside the gym, Sonia officially becomes the next professor, and she tells me to make it up to the champion tournament in Wyndon. After the cold trek up Route 10, I make it and go to the stadium with Hop to begin the semifinals. My first opponent is Marnie, whom I easily beat. Next up is Hop, and I smack around his team like a little bitch, entering me into the finals. Me and Hop meet up with Leon after the battle, and he suggests we have dinner together before the finals tomorrow. We wait on him in the lobby of a hotel, but he doesn't arrive. Piers then shows up and tells us that he's at Rose Tower with the chairman, so we go there to find him. Before we get too far, however, Oleana stops us. After a gauntlet of Oleana's employees, me and Hop finally make it up to the top of the tower, where Oleana fights me herself. I clear through her team, and we find Leon and Chairman Rose having a discussion about the energy crisis that will come 1,000 years from now. That seems to be the end of this whole debacle, so we go back to the hotel to rest for tomorrow's finals. The finals begin, and here's how it went. Nessa was no problem, as Flint, Michigan outclassed her water types. Alistair couldn't keep up with Heart and Penalty Kick, so he didn't give me much trouble. Raihan was the toughest of them all, but Return fucked him up once more. Finally, it was time to face Leon for the title of champion. However, Chairman Rose interrupts our battle by revealing that he's unleashing the darkest day again. He thinks it will stop the energy crisis coming in 1,000 years, but me, Leon, and Hop think otherwise. I go with Hop to the Slumbering Weald to try and find the Sword and Shield Pokemon, but we just find a rusted sword and shield instead. We take them back to Hammerlock Stadium to confront Rose. He explains how he used the Wishing Stars to unleash Eternatus and bring about the darkest day, and he attempts to stop me in battle. He, of course, fails, and I go up to the top of the building to help Leon deal with Eternatus. We get up there and see Leon failing to catch it. As it pops out of the Pokeball, it attacks me, so me and Kaba fend it off. It looks to be fainted. However, it actually just Gigantamaxes to become an opponent neither me or Hop can scratch. All of a sudden, Hop gets the idea to use the Rusted Sword and Shield. When we do, the legendary Pokemon, Zacian and Zazamanta, come to our aid. With our forces combined, we easily defeat Eternatus, and I catch it, saving the day. 3 days pass, and at last I'm able to face the champion, Leon. It took a few tries, but eventually, with the help of a few max revives and some hyper potions, Flint, Michigan dealt the killing blow to Leon's Charizard, leaving me and my team victorious. The biggest change to gameplay is that there are no more random encounters. I hear a lot of people speak positively on this change, but honestly, I never intrinsically hated them. It was always kind of fun to gamble in a patch of tall grass and see what sorts of rare Pokemon you could find. Now that every Pokemon is out in the open, it loses a bit of that charm. Plus, random encounters really haven't been that much of an annoyance the past few generations, so I wouldn't really say it fixes them or anything. The pros are that it helps the world feel more alive, the cons are that it ruins the fun of random encounters, and makes repels a bit less useful. It's hard for me to say if this is an overall positive or negative change. I guess it's just a change. Now let's move on to the difficulty. The only battles I struggled with were some of the gyms and the champion battle. The gyms were for the simple reason that Dynamax is unfair, and I refuse to stoop to their level and use it. The strategy with Dynamax is either to have a good type matchup or wait out the 3 turns of bullshit so the battle gets easy again. I feel like Game Freak was trying to make another challenge like the Totem battles, but couldn't be bothered to put in the same amount of effort. It doesn't help that Dynamax is a pretty overpowered tactic. When an opposing trainer used Megas or Z moves, it never felt like you had to use them yourself to win. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, so I'll end my thoughts there for now. Another thing that stands out in terms of gameplay are the gyms themselves. Besides the Dynamax BS, I actually think that these are some of the best gyms we've gotten in a while. The puzzles and challenges that they bring were, for the most part, very enjoyable. The last thing of note is that they removed Ride Pokemon. However, they didn't bring back HMs either. Surf, and only Surf, is replaced with the Rotom bike. Not a fan of this change. Gameplay receives a 95 out of 100. It was still an overall polished experience, but it did take some small steps back in a couple of places. To this game's credit, they did another bang-up job with the new Pokemon here. The designers took a page from Sun and Moon's book by trying to give every Pokemon something special, such as a signature move or unique ability, and it once again works out. Another thing they brought over from Sun and Moon is regional forms, except this time, there's a lot more of them, and they're hit or miss for me. I am glad they're back though. It was too great of an idea to scrap. On top of that, they gave special evolutions to some of these regional forms. I'm honestly not too big a fan of this. It's a bit confusing and it makes me wish that they would give regular evolutions to the original forms alongside it. Anyway, Cursola is cool, so that makes up for my autistic grievances. Galar has a healthy amount of solid Pokemon, but there are some very notable pieces of shit in the mix as well. I could really go off on a lot of these, but I'll give a special shout out to two in particular. Ice-Q is the saddest, most Reddit Pokemon ever. It's just a penguin with an ice cube on its dumb fucking head. Fuck you, Ice-Q. But my hate for Ice-Q is minuscule compared to Calyrex. What the hell were they smoking? No, actually this goes beyond a bad drug trip. Whoever thought up the design of this thing is mentally disturbed. Alright, let's move on. I'm tired of looking at it. For old Pokemon selection, I'll give it a Toxapex out of 10. Okay, but seriously, it's pretty good. I have no complaints. I have one last thing I need to say. Galarian Yamask has to be the dumbest fucking evolution ever. Pokemon selection gets an 85 out of 90, losing 5 points for introducing Calyrex. Gonna get this out of the way since it's one of the main problems people have with Gen 8. Game Freak straight up removed Z moves in Mega Evolution. I shouldn't have to go into why removing features is bad, but hey, maybe they added an amazing new gimmick to make up for it. Nope, we got Dynamaxing. It just makes Pokemon bigger. How incredibly uninspired and lame. Oh, but there's also Gigantamaxing, which gives them different forms. But wait, didn't we already have limited time forms that could be activated in battle? What happened to the... Oh, right. Gigantamaxing forms are equally as lazy, so I'm not going to waste more of my breath on them. Bigger maxing sucks, and I haven't heard anyone give a convincing argument to the contrary. On top of that, Lardo maxing is so stupidly overpowered. It's basically 3 mini Z moves with added effects and an HP boost for 3 turns. Alright, last thing. The way they give you the item to get Vaxxed is that the item needed for it just randomly falls out of the sky. That is a perfect summary for how ham-fisted and lazy this gimmick is. With Giga Chatting, you also have raid battles. I actually like the idea of them, too bad they're lumped in with a dogshit gimmick. Another feature which they replaced with a shitty alternative is Ride Pokemon. What the hell was wrong with Pokeride? I know my only issue with it was that it was underutilized. So what was Game Freak's solution to that? Removing it entirely just to replace a fraction of its function with something much lamer. Also, why does the Rotom bike have like a timed boost thing? This feature baffles me with how much of a downgrade it is. Let's move on to the positives. Your Pokemon boxes can now be accessed anywhere. Not the biggest deal, but it's convenient, so that's nice. Online functionality is better than Festival Plaza. Then you have the obligatory new moves, abilities, and items. Yeah, Gen 8 has a very lackluster list of new stuff that actually improves the game. Finally, Pokemon camps are this game's Poke-Me, and it's a suitable replacement for it. It's not better or worse, just a different way of interacting with your partners. New Editions gets an extremely generous 35 out of 80. I could have been a lot harsher here, but I'm giving Game Freak some leeway considering it's late into the series, and not very much can be done to improve the games further at this point. However, the fact that they removed more good features than they added is inexcusable. Let's start this section off with a fun little exercise. I'm going to list off some plot points, and afterward, you tell me which Pokemon game's plot I'm describing. The player character starts off by having an encounter with a legendary Pokemon on the outskirts of town. Early on into the player's journey, they run into the evil team, which is more of a comic relief than anything. Said team is often following around an edgy teenager. The player meets with the head of an influential company in the region midway through their adventure, and they're presented as someone who wants to make the region a better place. Late into the story, the player goes into the comic relief team's hideout, which is basically an entire town which they control. Before facing the champion, the company leader from earlier turns out to be the twist villain, who unleashes dangerous Pokemon onto the region. The player seeks out help from the legendary Pokemon in order to face off against this threat, and eventually saves the day. You're probably thinking I just described Sword and Shield, and you'd be partially right. However, in reality, those were plot points from both Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon. My whole point being that Sword and Shield's story is just a rehash of Sun and Moon's, but worse. The first reason it's worse being Team Yell. They are literally only there to serve as a roadblock. You could remove Team Yell from the overarching plot, and nothing would change. With Team Skull, they at least worked with Aether at the climax. On top of that, they were also funny as hell. Team Yell, on the other hand, fails at doing anything other than filling time. Surprisingly, they aren't even the worst antagonists of Sword and Shield. That honor goes to Chairman Rose. Hell, he might be the worst antagonist of the entire series. Archie and Maxie were dumb, but they at least had an idea of what the Legendary's power was, and how they planned to use it. Cyrus may have been a cynical nihilist, but at least in the end he didn't pretend his goals were for anything but his own gain. Lysander may have been a genocidal maniac, but he did have a plan for how he wanted to fix things. Rose has no idea what he's doing, no plan for how it would help, and tries to claim that it's all for the greater good. The energy crisis is coming in 1,000 fucking years. Just sit down and think of ways to harness this vastly unstudied power. Rose is just a dumbass. Plain and simple. What about the other characters? Are they any good? Short answer, no. Let's start with Marnie. She is a girl who is nice to you, and that is the extent of her personality. The only people who like her are pedophiles who post online about wanting a goth GF. Our other rival, Bede, is just a pissy Chairman Rose dick rider who gets BTFO'd by Oleana. The third and final rival, Hop, is equally as lacking. I'm sure I'll get comments like, well, you liked Hal, so why not Hop? 3 reasons. First of all, Hal had funny dialogue and felt like an actual friend. Secondly, Hop just cares about being strong, like Sharon if he didn't have an arc. Hal always cared about more than just winning and becoming champion. Lastly, Hal had better interactions and relationships with the characters around him. It was always funny when he and Gladian shared the screen. I can't say the same for Hop and Bede. Aside from the main characters, most of the gym leaders have gone back to being forgettable set pieces. The one exception to this is Opal. There were some funny scenes with her, and she sorta makes Bede more than just a Chairman Rose dick rider, though it's a bit forced. The only other character I liked was Sonya. She's the only one who goes through any non-forced change. And no, Hop doesn't count. His change is that he learns to not be a sore loser. That's not an arc, that's called growing up. Lastly, and certainly least, is Leon. He's the undefeated champion with an epic and retro Charizard as his ace. Do I need to explain what I dislike about him? Also, Hop's entire character is based on his relationship to this chode. Story and characters gets a 35 out of 70. One word, half-baked. Galar is a solid region. It's decently expansive and has enough unique locations to stand out from those before it. The wild area is definitely a place you can go. I mean, what else can I say about it? There are Pokemon, and you can catch them. Except put an asterisk on that, because you can only catch the ones at your level. So it basically works the same way that normal routes would. The difference being, it's like open world. And by open world, I mean able to be explored in its entirety in about half an hour. Besides that, I only have one other problem with it. The lack of a cohesive theme. I guess you could argue that the theme is Legends, but you can say that about literally any Pokemon game past Red and Blue. Anyway, it's still far from bad. I'm giving it a 55 out of 60. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the music this time around is not that good. It's passable, but a majority of the tracks are extremely forgettable. 40 out of 50. Let's go ahead and talk about Sword and Shield's post-game. You can catch legendaries, fight the battle tower, and play online. That's it. Wait, hold your horses. There's also an extra quest you can do in the Slumbering Weald. Let's go check it out. Yep. It's official. This is the worst post-game ever. Moving on from that, the lack of camera movement is very noticeable and confusing. In Sun and Moon, it was a little bit bothersome to not have that freedom, but in general, the camera was kept where it needed to be, and it made sense with the technical limitations of the 3DS. Here, it doesn't make sense at all. Why not make it a feature? Oh, but you can move it in the wild area, so that's at least something. Speaking of which, as soon as you get into the wild area, you're transported into an alternate universe, where Game Freak made Pokemon for the PS2 instead of the Game Boy. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but but it definitely isn't up to snuff with how it should look. Pretty much every other Pokemon game has had exceptional graphics for the system they were on, so it shouldn't be any different this go around. We should especially be seeing better graphics considering what they took away for it. I've avoided talking about it up to this point, but I can ignore it no longer. This one controversy was the catalyst for this series being made. I've been hinting at it this whole time, but now it's finally time to confront it. Dexit. In June of 2019, there was a live gameplay showcase for Sword and Shield. In it, they had the main gameplay director, Junichi Masuda, answering questions. Around 25 minutes in, he dropped this bombshell.
And so what that means for Pokemon Sword and Shield is that players will be able to transfer their Pokemon from Pokemon Home only if they appear in the Galar region Pokedex.
No more national decks. No longer would players be able to trade in every single old Pokemon from games before. Initially, this sparked massive outrage, and rightfully so. Look, I'm always one who tries to use new Pokemon for each adventure, but there are people who enjoy using their same set of favorites each time. I don't think that's the best playstyle, but we need to respect that it's a valid option. This applies even more so outside of the main playthrough. When you're battling online, every Pokemon should be available to you. I don't want to hear any bullshit about balance, because there's no way the shitstorm of competitive Pokemon can be truly balanced, with or without Nat decks. If I want to use Girafarig on my competitive team, I should be able to, no matter how stupid of an idea it may be. The key aspect of what makes Pokemon so special is the Pokemon. Once you start taking that away, you start to lose the soul of the franchise. So why did they take Nat decks away? According to Masuda, it's because, and I quote, "We're creating it with much higher fidelity with higher quality animations." Oh, do you mean the animations which are ripped straight from Sun and Moon? Or maybe you mean the battle animations, which don't look any significantly better from the generation previous. Even if they did follow through on this promise, removing Nat decks and making higher quality graphics are not mutually exclusive. They could have easily focused on better animations for just the Galar decks and still included all the old decks just without polished animations. Instead, they made up a stupid ultimatum for themselves that they didn't even follow. Despite the lies, despite the angry outcry from fans, despite the supposed boycotts, Sword and Shield became the second highest selling Pokemon games of all time. For everyone who bought a first-hand copy of Pokemon Sword and Shield, next time you want to complain about the quality of recent games, don't. Because you were one of the people who told Game Freak they could cut corners, hike the price, and get away with it. That's right. After all that, they still had the gall to charge $60 for this shit. They didn't stop there either. They also charged $30 for an actual post-game and called it DLC. I'm not even going to waste my breath on Isle of Armor or Crown Tundra. It's just creating a problem, then selling a solution. I have almost nothing positive to say in this section. For that reason, Other will get a measly 5 out of 50. Now that my piece for these games has been said, let's see how it all comes together. Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield earned a final score of 350 out of 500, or an even 70%. One thing I often hear in favor of Gen 8 is simply, well, I had fun playing it. Listen, it's a Pokemon game. The two most important factors, gameplay and Pokemon selection, are, to this game's credit, very well done. But those are only two aspects of what makes a truly excellent Pokemon game. Just because Sword and Shield are fun doesn't make its various other problems disappear, and it certainly doesn't make them worth $60. I can have fun huffing glue. That doesn't make it good. With that, I've finally said everything I've wanted to about Sword and Shield, and really, Pokemon as a whole. I know I haven't covered the remakes, and I know there's still plenty of Pokemon content coming down the pipeline, but this feels like the most appropriate stopping point, at least for now. The end goal of this series was always to expose Sword and Shield for the garbage that they are, and now that I've done that, I can let the series rest. I want to thank all of you who both joined and stuck with me for this long ride. But before I let you go, there's one more thing I want to do. As you can see, this is a tier list. You know what it is. I know what it is. And right here, these are all the scores that I've been giving out over the course of this series. You know, I've been doing it as like a percentage. So this is more of a formality than anything, but it's going to be just a fun little victory lap, I guess. And if I stutter or anything, that's because this is off the cuff. I'm probably going to say a lot, but let's just get started. So, red and blue, immediately, C tier, it got 65. Yeah, it got a 65, so we're going to put it C tier. It was definitely the worst out of any of these, but, you know, humble beginnings. Gold and silver did a little bit better, but not as better as people think. They say it's like, oh, it's the definitive Pokemon game. Well, no, not really. It's still got many, many flaws. A lot of those that carry over from Gen 1. So Gen 3 up next. Also, little trick a lot of people don't know. You can create inner tier rankings. Just put the better game towards the left, and that's like a higher rank than, say, those towards the right. So gold and silver better than red and blue. Anyways, moving on. So Gen 3, yeah, that was an A tier, right? They got like an 82. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I remember that. It's a good game. It's bright. It's colorful. Archie and Maxie are dumb, but it's silly. It's not the best game in the world, but it's got a good Pokemon selection. I don't know why I'm moving Sun and Moon up. Next up is Gen 4. It dropped down a tier. That's going to be high B tier. 77. Yeah. Gen 5. Our first S tier. Very good games. Very few will dispute this nowadays. Yeah, enough said, really. Gen 6. Now, we're going to give it an A. A lot of people would put it here. And that's because they think with their feelings. They don't think about, like, it's still a solid Pokemon game. It still has all of the improvements from those from those games before it. And it introduces enough of its own new stuff to be good, like fairies and megas. That's all solid. It's just, it doesn't stand out as much. It's pretty forgettable. And it has a weak story and characters. But still A tier. Sun and Moon. SS. The best. Everyone saw this coming. I mean, I don't even have to explain. Sword and Shield. I could be cheeky and put it here. A high C. But we're going to be generous. Give it a low B. All right, let's move that into place there. Yep. Just below Diamond and Pearl. I think this one has more soul. Sword and Shield actively remove features. This adds the physical special split is the big one. I think it has its own problems, of course. That's why it's in B tier. But it's still better than this. Especially in terms of post-game. Yeah. So that's the tier list. Just feel free to screen cap this, future me, if you want. And I guess that's it for the series. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.